You weren't supposed to find this video, unless it was your time. That feeling in your chest right now? That's recognition. Your spirit knows what your mind is still processing. You were led here for a reason. I'm speaking to someone right now who's been wrestling with a truth you've been afraid to admit, even to yourself. The church walls that once held you no longer feel like home. You've been sitting in those pews feeling more alone than when you're by yourself. Singing those songs but your spirit isn't rising. Hearing those sermons but your soul isn't being fed. And the guilt? It's crushing you. Am I backsliding? Am I losing my faith? Am I disappointing God? These questions haunt you at 3 a.m. when the world is quiet and it's just you and the ceiling and that hollowness in your chest. Let me release you with this truth: you didn't walk away from God. You're walking toward Him. Your spirit is leading you to a deeper truth that doesn't fit in the box others built for you. What you're experiencing isn't rebellion, it's revelation. If this already hit your spirit like lightning, drop a fire in the comments so I know I'm talking to the right soul. Because what I'm about to share isn't for everyone. It's for the chosen ones who feel displaced but divinely directed. You are the chosen. The hidden. The rising. You've always known you were different, haven't you? Even as a child, you felt things others didn't feel, saw things others couldn't see. You've always had questions that simple answers couldn't satisfy. Your hunger for truth has always been insatiable. That's not a flaw, it's your design. You weren't set apart to be abandoned. You were set apart to be anointed. You weren't made sensitive to be broken. You were made sensitive to be a vessel. You weren't given those questions to torture you. You were given those questions to lead you. Your journey out of those church doors wasn't the end of your faith, it was the beginning of your calling. Let me speak something over you that religion was too afraid to tell you: sometimes, the most faithful act is to leave. Sometimes, the most spiritual decision is to walk away from spaces that confine the vastness of what God designed you to become. This isn't about church bashing. This isn't about denouncing communities of faith. This is about honoring the sacred whisper that's been telling you, there's more. There's deeper. There's wider. What you're experiencing is ancient and holy. The prophet Elijah didn't find God in the religious structures of his time, he found God in the wilderness, in the silence, in the still, small voice. Moses encountered the divine not in Egypt's temples but in a burning bush in the desert. Jesus himself often withdrew from religious spaces to pray alone. Your discomfort with church isn't a sign of spiritual decline, it's a sign of spiritual awakening. Your dissatisfaction isn't faithlessness, it's the faithful response of a soul being called to something more authentic. And today, I'm going to walk you through the 7 divine revelations about why your spirit led you away from traditional church spaces, and why that decision marks you not as lost, but as chosen. Let me tell you what's really happening: you didn't outgrow God. You outgrew a human interpretation of God. Think about it. When you were a child, you needed milk. Simple teachings. Black and white instructions. The comfort of clear boundaries and definitive answers. And for a season, that church experience served you exactly as it should have. But now, your spirit craves meat. Depth. Mystery. Questions that lead to more questions. Growth that spirals upward rather than marches in straight, predictable lines. Your discomfort in church isn't because you're falling away, it's because you're rising up. The container that once nurtured you now constrains you. The womb that once protected you would now suffocate you if you stayed. Did you know that in nature, when an eagle grows too large for its nest, the mother eagle begins to make it uncomfortable? She pulls out the soft lining, exposes the thorns, even pushes the eaglet to the edge until it must spread its wings or fall. This isn't cruelty. It's sacred preparation. Because an eagle was never meant to stay in the nest. It was meant for the vast, open sky. Your spirit is like that eagle. The discomfort you felt wasn't punishment, it was promotion. It wasn't abandonment, it was advancement. If you can feel in your bones that you didn't leave church because you wanted less of God, but because you wanted more, comment deeper waters below. I need to know who I'm really talking to. Remember when you raised your hand in Sunday school or Bible study with that question that made the room go quiet? That question that got deflected with, "Just have faith," or, "That's a mystery we can't understand." Here's what was really happening: your questions weren't inappropriate, they were inopportune. They weren't faithless, they were fearsome. Because genuine questions have power. They disturb comfortable certainty. They expose the difference between inherited belief and authentic faith. The most spiritually alive people throughout history have been the questioners, the wrestlers, the ones who wouldn't settle for prepackaged answers. Jacob wrestled with God and walked away with both a blessing and a limp. Job questioned divine justice and God answered him directly. Thomas doubted and Jesus showed up personally to address his uncertainties. Your questions don't disqualify you from being chosen, they confirm it. When church became a place where your deepest questions were silenced rather than sacred, you didn't abandon truth by leaving. You honored truth by seeking it beyond those walls. Let me tell you what that really means. Your hunger for authentic answers wasn't spiritual weakness, it was spiritual warfare. Because the enemy doesn't fear blind followers. The enemy fears awakened seekers who won't settle for less than genuine encounter. If you've been made to feel shame for your questions, I break that lie right now. Your questions are holy. Your seeking is sacred. Your refusal to silence your spirit's deepest inquiries marks you as chosen for a path of authentic revelation. Type "Truth Seeker" in the comments if you know your questions weren't rebellion, they were the roadmap to your real purpose. Here's something they don't tell you in Sunday service: religion can become the greatest barrier to genuine spiritual relationship. You started noticing it, didn't you? The gap between what was preached and what was practiced. The emphasis on rules over transformation. The focus on conformity rather than communion. The subtle message that God's love was somehow conditional on your performance or adherence to the group's expectations. And something in your spirit knew, this isn't it. This isn't the living, breathing, all-consuming love that your soul was created for. You weren't looking for perfect people. You were looking for authentic ones. You weren't expecting a flawless community, you were hoping for a faithful one. But when the mask stayed firmly in place, when vulnerability was discouraged rather than embraced, when appearance became more important than authenticity, your spirit recognized the warning signs. Because you carry something precious, the innate capacity to recognize divine reality. You can feel the difference between religious performance and spiritual presence. You know when words are just words and when they're vessels of life. This sensitivity isn't a curse, it's a gift. It's the mark of one who's been given eyes to see and ears to hear beyond the surface, beyond the script, beyond the show. The shift that changes everything is this: leaving church wasn't you choosing less holiness, it was you refusing to settle for the appearance of holiness without its power. It wasn't you walking away from God. It was you walking away from anything that falsely claimed to be the fullness of God when it was merely a human framework. If you resonated with this revelation, comment "real over religious," because I'm speaking to the ones who would rather have authentic relationship than religious reputation. In those church spaces, you felt everything, didn't you? The tension beneath the smiles. The pain behind the praise. The unspoken rules that everyone followed but no one acknowledged. Maybe they called you too sensitive or spiritually immature, or told you to just focus on the positive. Maybe they suggested your discernment was actually division, your perception was pride. Here's the divine truth: your sensitivity isn't a spiritual liability, it's a spiritual lens. You weren't designed to shut down your senses, you were designed to steward them. Throughout Scripture, God used the sensitive ones, the ones who could feel what others couldn't. The prophets who wept while others celebrated. The watchmen who sensed danger while others slept. The ones who couldn't ignore the gap between what was and what should be. You didn't leave church because you couldn't handle truth. You left because you could handle more truth than was being offered. You left because your spirit was calibrated for authenticity at a level the environment couldn't sustain. This sensitivity marks you. Sets you apart. It's the reason you couldn't stay where others seemed content. It's the reason surface answers never satisfied you. It's the reason you felt everything so deeply, the inspiration and the hypocrisy, the presence and the pretense. What if this sensitivity, this ability to perceive beyond the visible, to feel beyond the expressed, is actually your greatest spiritual gift? What if it's not something to suppress or overcome, but something to refine and release? If you feel this, comment, "I receive it," in all caps. Declare it over yourself right now, "My sensitivity is my superpower." Say it again. Let it sink from your mind into your spirit. Since leaving traditional church structures, have you felt the wilderness? The isolation? The seasons where God seems silent and the path seems unclear? This wilderness isn't punishment for leaving, it's preparation for leading. It's not divine abandonment, it's divine apprenticeship. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness before he was ready to lead others to freedom. David was anointed king but spent years in caves and foreign lands before taking the throne. Jesus himself was led by the Spirit into the wilderness before beginning his public ministry. The wilderness strips away the non-essential. It silences the voices that aren't from God. It forces you to distinguish between what you truly believe and what you merely absorbed. It transforms borrowed faith into blood-bought conviction. In the structured environment of church, you could lean on others' understanding, others' revelations, others' relationships with God. But in the wilderness, it's just you and Him. Raw. Real. No intermediaries. No interpreters. Just direct encounter. This stripping away feels like loss, like lack, like loneliness. But it's actually liberation. Because everything that's being removed isn't you, it's what was added to you. It's the expectations, interpretations, and obligations that were placed upon your pure connection with the divine. The breaking was birthing. The isolation was incubation. The silence was sacred. Say this with me, "I am not abandoned in this wilderness. I am being prepared in this wilderness." Every moment of this journey is purposeful. Every season of silence is strategic. If you're in this wilderness season right now, comment "Wilderness Warrior" below. Let me know you're out there. Because your journey matters, and your preparation isn't in vain. Here's something powerful I need to speak over you. Your departure from traditional church spaces isn't just about what you left behind, it's about what you're moving toward. You're not just a leaver, you're a pioneer. You're not just walking away, you're walking ahead. You're not just discontent with what was, you're pregnant with what could be. Throughout history, every significant spiritual movement began with people who were willing to leave the familiar for the faithful, the comfortable for the commissioned. The early church itself was a radical departure from established religious systems. The Protestant Reformation began with souls who recognized that existing structures had drifted from their divine purpose. What looks like rebellion to some is actually reformation to God. What appears as isolation is actually innovation. Your discomfort with the status quo isn't dissidence, it's discernment. Your inability to settle for less than authentic spiritual community isn't unfaithfulness, it's holy restlessness. Because the truth is, you're not alone in this journey. There are thousands, millions of others just like you. Souls who love God deeply but could no longer breathe in environments that confuse conformity with communion. Hearts that hunger for a faith that transforms rather than merely informs. Spirits that sense there's a more authentic expression of spiritual community waiting to be born. And here's the shift that changes everything. What if God allowed you to experience the limitations of existing structures so you could participate in creating new ones? What if your disillusionment wasn't meant to end your spiritual journey but to propel you into the next chapter of it? You are a forerunner. A path clearer. A cycle breaker who makes way for a more authentic spiritual expression. Type 111 in the comments if this lit something in your soul, if you know deep down you weren't just called out, you were called forward. Let me tell you why your decision to leave traditional church spaces often triggered such strong reactions. Authentic faith is always threatening to religious systems. Think about it. Jesus himself faced the strongest opposition not from the irreligious but from the religious establishment. Why? Because genuine spiritual authority, the kind that flows from relationship rather than position, from encounter rather than education, will always threaten power structures built on control rather than transformation. When you began to discover that God was bigger than the box you were handed, when you started experiencing Him outside the prescribed channels, when your relationship with the divine began flourishing despite your distance from religious structures, it challenged the entire premise that those structures were necessary mediators of your spiritual life. Your growing, thriving, deepening spirituality outside those walls implicitly questioned the narrative that those walls were essential for spiritual growth. Your direct connection with God challenged systems built on approved access points and designated gatekeepers. This isn't about demonizing all church structures or leaders. Many are genuine, serving sacrificially from pure hearts. This is about recognizing why authentic spiritual growth that happens outside approved channels often triggers such discomfort, disapproval, and even attempts to bring you back into the fold through fear or guilt. Your journey isn't a threat to God's purposes, it's only threatening to purposes that aren't aligned with God's heart. Your direct access to divine presence isn't a danger to the body of Christ, it's only dangerous to systems that have substituted control for Christ. Here's the liberating truth: the same God who works through structures also works beyond them. The same Spirit who moves within institutions also moves independently of them. Your choice to seek God beyond traditional frameworks doesn't separate you from the universal body of Christ, it connects you to it in its most essential, eternal form. If you know you didn't leave the faith but stepped deeper into it, comment "I'm free" below. Because that's what this journey is ultimately about. Freedom to pursue authentic relationship with God without intermediaries or limitations. Chosen one, this is your divine moment of activation. I speak this over your life right now: you were not rejected, you were redirected. You were not abandoned, you were advanced. What looked like spiritual crisis was actually spiritual chrysalis, the breaking open that precedes breakthrough, the dissolution that enables transformation. Every tear you've cried questioning your path, every night you've lain awake wondering if you've lost your way, every moment of loneliness when you missed the community but couldn't compromise your conviction, none of it was wasted. All of it was weaving something new, something true, something necessary in you. Your hunger for authenticity isn't rebellion, it's revival in its purest form. Your refusal to separate Sunday faith from Monday life isn't compromise, it's commissioning. Your inability to confine God to a building or a program or a denomination isn't faithlessness, it's the very essence of faith. You're not waiting on God. God is waiting on you. Waiting for you to fully embrace this journey. Waiting for you to stop apologizing for the path you're on. Waiting for you to recognize that your departure wasn't the end of your purpose but the beginning of it. This is not the end. This is the unveiling. This is where your authentic faith, tested in the wilderness, refined in the fire, stripped of performance and pretense, becomes a beacon for others who are where you once were, trapped between genuine spiritual hunger and religious disillusionment. You were chosen not just to leave, but to lead. Not just to question, but to quench the thirst of fellow questioners. Not just to recognize what isn't authentic, but to cultivate what is. The same sensitivity that made church uncomfortable for you is the same sensitivity that will guide you to create spaces of genuine spiritual encounter for others. The same questions that went unanswered will become the foundation of new conversations that bring life rather than limitation. The same courage that carried you out those doors will carry you into your true calling. If this stirred your soul, drop a wave in the comments. That's how I know you're part of this rising wave. This movement of authentic faith that can't be contained by walls or traditions or human expectations. Subscribe now if you know this is your season of becoming. I speak blessings over everyone who presses that button, clarity for your journey, community for your path, courage for your calling. You didn't walk away from God's house. You recognize that you are God's house. The temple not made with hands. The dwelling place of divine presence. And that, chosen one, changes everything.